Hey, you're about to listen to an older episode of the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. This is a podcast that Sid Coop, Jason Ballard, and myself, Jeremy McDonald, started back in 2018 to answer the practical questions that you're asking in your youth ministry. But lots has changed since we started it in 2018. We've changed the name. We're doing new and different events and lots of other things. The thing that hasn't changed, though, is the content you're about to listen to, we think is still really valuable. But if you notice that some of the things we're talking about are obviously a little bit older, that is okay. You can always head to youthworker.community to stay up to date with what's happening currently right now here in 2024, and you can track along with us there. We'd love to see you. But enjoy this episode. Episode 107 of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Welcome back. This is Jeremy hosting today's conversation, and want to give you a little heads up. Today's conversation with Chris Tompkins is a phenomenal one. Sid and I got a chance to interview him. He is a mutual friend of ours. He and Sid are peers. They've been friends for a very long time. And in particular, what I love about Chris is that he has really been influential in helping to shape just an absolute ton of ministry leaders, of young adults through the camp that he's been a part of for a very long time, but then also has just thought strategically about equipping ministries and the church and all sorts of different places where youth workers gather. Chris has been really, really helpful, especially on the research side of things. And so we're just pumped for him as he launches this new podcast, Shaping Our World. It technically will go live later this week if you're listening to this right away, but you can certainly find that now, Shaping Our World podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. He'll mention that as well. And he gets to have some really cool conversations with some great leaders and will help you as a youth worker for sure. So be sure to subscribe to that podcast. You can follow along with the work that Chris is doing there. And then just wanted to say, we had a great conversation. It was kind of a wide-ranging one. And so as the title suggests, what are some best practices when mentoring teenagers? That's a bit of the direction. And yet you're going to hear a great tool that you can use when wanting to draw out information from a teenager. You're going to hear some ideas on one-on-one mentoring that you can apply even to your own small group ministry, wherever you're at. And so all that to say, really looking forward to sharing this particular conversation that we get to have with Chris Tompkins. And if you are a volunteer, you need to know, if you're a volunteer in youth ministry, this is the conversation that we love having with you, to share with you some of the ideas, the tips, the tools about doing good ministry as a youth worker. And if you ever have thoughts or questions or things that you think we should be covering, or just even questions about your own ministry, we would love to hear from you. It helps us as we shape the content for these conversations that we get to have each week. And so if you go to youthministry.team, that's where you can drop us a line. That email comes straight into me, and I'd love to be able to take your advice, your thoughts, and turn those even into some episodes. So be sure to let us know there. But for right now, let's jump into today's conversation with Chris Tompkins.
Welcome to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the team of volunteers. So this podcast is for the whole team. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you're asking so you can be encouraged and equipped as you head into your role in your youth ministry this week.
Welcome back to the Youth Ministry Team Podcast. Sid, we've got a legend with us in our midst here today.
Seriously.
I would love for you to introduce Chris Tompkins to our audience.
Ooh, you know what? Whether he likes it or not, I like to introduce him as my friend. I think he's preferring to keep a little bit more distance, perhaps. And I understand that. We understand that. That makes sense. But I am going to introduce my friend, Chris Tompkins. Chris, it's so good having you here. Jeremy, I met Chris, man, I think it's probably a dozen years ago at the Canadian Youth Worker Conferences when they were national events, one in Vancouver, one in Toronto. And Chris was presenting on some research work he'd done called Elastic Morality. And it was really smart, really thoughtful. And I was fascinated by the dude because not only was he, had the mind of an academic, but he could actually tell jokes too. Like, how great was that? Like, it was this wonderful combination. So anyways, Chris has become a friend of mine and a friend of ours. He's been a part of some of our conferences with with YWC when we've done regional conferences. He's great. And we just really appreciate him. And Chris, I think dude, we're going to get you on here. But I think the other thing I love about you, bro, is that you have remained solidly planted on the ground in youth ministry. You continue to work with students, with young adults who are working with students. And so your learnings are not only research-based, but practical experience as well. And we just love having you with us, dude. Thank you so much for joining us, bro.
No, it's my pleasure. And you mentioned about being funny. My wife would argue with me that I'm not funny at all. It's being around people like you that actually bring the humor out. So I definitely appreciate that, because that's something that I pride myself on, is bringing some jokes every once in a while. So thanks for mentioning that. That's the most important thing beyond any credentials, is that you find me funny. So that's a warming moment in my heart right now.
I do want to say, Chris, the one story that I have that I think there's like a nugget of truth in here for somebody listening is about 10 years ago, I came to a conference, a youth worker conference. I was still a student of youth ministry at Briarcrest, and I convinced Marv Penner to invite me to introduce me to his friends. So he introduced me to you.
Did I try to hire you on the spot? Was that?
No, I was trying to get a job on the spot, but you didn't. You were you're part of a camp, executive director, and so like there's seasonal positions. I was looking for something full time.
That's right.
But the networking that came from that one meeting and making that connection, you thought of me years later, and helped connect me to the job that I got at Connexus Church in Ontario. And so sometimes it's the long play.
That is true. That is one of the things I have. And that's what I miss about these national conferences. And, we're in the pandemic right now, is half of it is networking and meeting people, and then being like, hey, you need to meet this person. And Sid and I both do that and extend the networks beyond that. So yeah, you're right, actually, Jared, that I remember that. And part of it is because Sid just kept raving about this Jeremy, and just, so did Marv. So I was like, okay, well, let's get him to Ontario, because that's the center of the universe. So we need to pull everyone in, right, Sid?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And now, of course, here's the rest of the story, because while Jared was trying to hustle you for a full-time job, he'd also tried to hustle me for a full-time job. And I was like, oh, I should connect you to
yeah, that's
someone else. Right. And now we're back.
And then I connected him to somebody totally different, another one of my friends. So
exactly.
So there you go. Networking is great. Okay, so Chris, tell us about the work that you do and a little bit of why you've been doing it for so long. Because you've been in the same role, the same organization for how long?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've been in the same organization since 2005. Yeah. So I'm at Muskoka Woods right now. But it goes back. I started doing youth ministry essentially when I was a youth myself, and I grew up, without belaboring a long story, I grew up a pastor's kid, a missionary kid, a camp kid. So when I was first born, my parents quit their jobs and moved to a camp called Teen Ranch here in Ontario. So I grew up at camp. So in high school, I just started going to summer camps. In university, I worked at Muskoka Woods and was involved in camps, but never wanted to do that with my career. Wanted to be a doctor, pursued a whole bunch of other things. And this is probably one of the reasons I'm so passionate about staying in it, is, that transformational period for me in figuring out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. Really, that's when youth ministry came back in, and I was youth pastor for a number of years in Toronto. Just in Scarborough, I think 7 years total, and then transitioned to Muskoka Woods in 2005, and have been doing it ever since. And I still am here today. And geez, I don't even know what year it is anymore, but it's been a long time. And one of the things I think, just to quickly answer your question, is that has kept me in youth ministry and what got me into it was, even though I grew up in the church, I didn't really go to youth group. And so when I started as a youth pastor, one of the questions that stuck to me that really helped me, I was like, I don't know, what do you do at youth group? I've never really even been. I hear people talk about it. I asked myself, when I was that age, what kind of older mentor would I have wanted? Who would I have listened to? What would have shaped, who would I paid attention to and say, you know what, I want to listen to that person. And so I thought of all of the attributes and things that I would have valued when I was 16. I'm like, look, I just got to become that for young people. And for me, the big question, and probably why I've stayed working with more young adults recently, is, man, to have somebody come alongside you to really help you think about who you are and what kind of contribution you want to make to the world is absolutely crucial. And some of the conversations we have in youth ministry are life-changing. Every week, they're not always those, but every once in a while, there are some of those conversations that change the trajectory of people's lives. And so, we run a summer camp at Muskoka Woods, but some of it is just to come alongside the young adults that work here and play a role in their lives. So when they're like, man, how do you know when you get married? Like, what's that all about? And like, how do I choose this career? I still have people who I was like one-to-one mentors through Muskoka Woods that call me to ask about mortgages. Like, how do you do that? Because, they move from England and their parents aren't as close anymore. And so the ability to continue to coach and walk alongside, and some of this stuff is in really dark and painful times. And to be able to provide some hope, to give some guidance, to offer thought-provoking questions for young people, whatever their age is, to really shape them is probably the reason why I still do it. That's what gets me excited and get out of bed every morning.
Yeah, Chris, when I first, I remember we'd met at conferences, and then I started coming to Muskoka to be a part of some of the staff training, and mostly I wanted to come to learn what was taking place there, because what was happening was transforming young adults that we were sending from our youth ministry to Muskoka, and things were happening in their lives that were really significant. And I remember what really stood out to me again was your commitment to mentoring, your commitment to be meeting with a group of students one-on-one throughout that whole summer. And I just want to take a moment to just really draw this out. Like, we have a large number of volunteer youth workers who are listening here. And I think there's a couple of things that you should hear from Chris's story already. Number one is that simply, being relationally present with kids matters. Like, it creates the context that can allow for significant conversations to take place. They don't happen every week, but what we don't realize is that by showing up every week, that in and of itself is significant, and it lays the foundation for significant conversations. And then the other thing is, when you remain present over time, you're invited into conversations that you would have never even dreamed possible when you first got started. So we just don't know how God's going to use that to be really transformative in the life of a young person. And Chris, I'm just really thankful for your integrity and how you've continued to model that in what you guys do. I just love it so much. Way to go, bro. Thank you for that. Love it.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Sid. But can I just add one piece to build off of what you're saying? I think sometimes when we're involved, and particularly as a volunteer, right? You come in and you're like, man, I got this moment, this time to come alongside these people. You've got multiple people in your small group, whatever that is. And I think sometimes we think that there's like one way to do things, or, a certain formula or a structure. So your point, being involved in the long term, that's not with everyone. Like, that's not assuming that every person in your small group right now, you'll be invited to their wedding and you'll be, dedicating their children. But there may be one of them, there may be two of them, or maybe next year's group. And to not lose heart, to not give up faith along the time, and to be patient and to be present, and to let the chips fall where they do. And, we set it up here at Muskoka Woods that every summer we get some people that we have one-to-ones with and mentor. And, we keep people over time while they're with us, and then we do our best to kind of journey with them after they leave. So every year I get in, one or two new people, depending on who's graduated from Muskoka Woods. And not everyone stays with it for the long haul. And people are like, how do you figure out like who? And I go, the people that want to stay in touch with me, they do. And you cultivate those ones. Don't put yourself in a whole lot of pressure to follow up with everybody who is in, a one-to-one or a small group, but pick the people that really demonstrate that they want to be connected, and be present and patient with them. But then show up every week for the people who are there, and do your best on what you're called to do, and be present. And we're going to talk about a whole bunch of this stuff either, but just to kind of build on that, it's not like, there's this long consistency with everybody who's come through, but there are moments with some people on a night that you just have something to offer and give them, and you never hear from them again. They never show up back to youth group. They don't, and that's okay. And that's great. And so it comes in all shapes and sizes and looks a whole lot different, but there is something about consistency that's really important. We could probably go on a million topics from that, right, Sid?
Yes. Go ahead,
Well,
Jerry.
I was going to ask because I think that's something that's so special about the work that you guys do at Muskoka Woods, and the intentionality around that mentoring. For those that are listening, I mean, we're all mostly in that type of role, and yet there's maybe some things even that you've recognized that are not necessarily special to Muskoka Woods, but they're special to how you set people up in that mentoring journey that could be worthwhile passing along to some of our small group leaders. Because there's a bunch of leaders that are like, oh, I can't think of a moment in the last year where it was like a significant conversation. Like they just cannot imagine that it's happening. And maybe, you've got some guidance that you give to your mentors that you could pass along to our leaders.
Yeah, I would say, sometimes we wait for those moments to happen in the structured events. And the way we coach the people who lead one-to-ones at Muskoka Woods is that the journey, we need people to have a consistent time throughout the week where they meet and check in. But a one-to-one relationship at Muskoka Woods extends well beyond that weekly meeting. It's the regular high fives, the check-ins, the text messages, hey, I noticed you doing that. Because one of the things that I like to do too is I watch, and not in a creepy stalker way, but I watch my one-on-ones engage throughout the week. And I call out stuff that I see that's like, man, when you did that, that was amazing. Like I was watching you in your evening program. So my time with them, they also recognize that I'm noticing them outside that context. And now I'm also using my time with them to encourage and speak. And who doesn't love to be acknowledged for something that they didn't even know they were doing, and people were watching? So it's just a small example. And you may be like, well, camp, that's easy because you're living and working together. Yeah, but in our regular lives, you can do that too. You can just fire a text on a non-youth night and say, hey, how are you doing today? Ask them. If they say, hey, I'm worried, if their prayer request on a Tuesday night is for a test, send them a message later and say, how did that test go? That's the stuff that just will continue to pay off. And I think sometimes we want it to be about the moment we're there or the structured time. And so we give a lot of intentionality to that structured time, but we recognize that most of the relationship building actually happens outside of that. So how are you staying involved? How are you connecting? How are you thinking about people? One of the things I've just learned in my own personal life is, man, in my prayer life in the mornings, God brings people to my life and I journal and I write their names down. Well, now I'm starting to like text them and say, hey, I don't know why, but Jesus just brought you to mind this morning and I'm praying for you, Sid, and I don't think we hear that stuff enough. I know what it does to me when people send it to me. So for example, Sid and I live far away, but we can stay in relationship. We don't see each other in a regular structured time, but we can keep in communion with one another. And I think that's what I would encourage from that we've learned is how to stay in communion and community with your kids beyond the event itself.
Yeah. And Chris, even as you're talking here, I heard a researcher or sociologist speak about the idea of phatic communication so that, when even the small things carry much bigger weight behind it than what we think. So that text isn't just like a 3-word text. It says, hey, you're important to me. Mm-hmm. You're on my mind. We're in this together. You're part of my community. Like those small things actually carry huge weight. And the other thing I love is the responsibility. Students are looking for mentors to give them a vision of what the future could be. They'll find those people. It's in us to need it. 100%. And when we own that and begin to paint possible kingdom futures for kids, it can be so transforming in their lives as well and really set them on a powerful direction. And so, those two things, especially Chris, I know you guys are really intentional about both those things. We love that. That applies to every single one of our volunteers that are listening right now, wondering, does what I do matter? Yeah, probably even more than what you think. And with a little bit of intentionality, it can 10x the experience. So I think that's great. Hey, Chris, Jer, I'm going to shift a little bit to some of the bigger ideas and issues that Chris is dealing with. Chris, you're doing this sweet podcast right now that I know is really great. It's called Shaping Our World. You're talking to a lot of experts on youth ministry. And, it's funny because so many of us who have felt comfortable in youth ministry over this last year have become uncomfortable because we're in unprecedented times. But as you're talking to the people you are, and they're intelligent and thoughtful, what are some of the big themes that you're hearing concerning the next generation, issues they're dealing with, situations they find themselves in? What are the big themes that keep coming up over and over again in your conversations?
Yeah, it's really interesting starting it in this season because, as you mentioned, some of the things that may not have been present or as noticeable are kind of jumping to the surface. And can I just give a little context before I answer that question too? Like and you mentioned this earlier, I spent a lot of my life, and one of the reasons I stayed in this for a long time is youth ministries provide an avenue for some of my own interest and skills and gifts. So I have a researching bent to me. I've been involved in research projects. And I found that through my degree program and the research that we're doing and the access because of my role that I have to these people is I'm talking and learning about things that are out there that are really interesting, getting perspectives on things, and to go, man, parents, volunteer youth workers, teachers, whoever wants to listen, how do we get access to hear from some of these people who are living and breathing this stuff, whether that's in the research world or not? And so we ask them, we just simply, like this podcast, we get on and we say, what are you learning about kids today? What do you know about youth culture? What excites you, makes you hopeful? And what are you concerned about? So one of the themes I can say right off the bat, because I always like to focus on the positive. I think too often we get in there and we're like, oh man, young people today, like what's going on, entitled this, and we're screwed up over here. I can tell you that most of the guests that I've talked to are most enthusiastic to talk about the things that they see in this generation. And so a few things that they've talked about is, just this generation's openness to possibilities for the future. They hold things, I won't say really loosely, but they're excited about what's to come. They see possibilities where sometimes as we get older, we just see problems and challenges to overcome. And I think particularly a lot of the people that I've talked to on this podcast talk about like the growing social consciousness of the young people today. They seem to be more aware and more attuned to some of the issues that are out there and can be pretty passionate about advocating change. And I think that's just, I think really important to highlight off the top. A lot of people talk about this, and there's a phrase that I use that I learned from my mentor, Don Pasterski, who spent a lot of time with me, and I think this is true when we start to talk about youth issues, is he always talks about celebrating the virtue and discerning the vulnerability. Like everything itself has a virtue and it has a vulnerability. Maybe not everything, but most things. You can find the positive and the negative is another way to say it. So anytime you come to something, there's both. So for instance, social media. A lot of people talk about how today young people have way more access to information than they ever have before. And so their ability to learn, their ability to shape who they are today is really critical. So like my daughter knows how to use technology way better than I do, like from being online all year in Google Classroom and to GarageBand for music class and all this stuff. Like her access to stuff is not what it was when I was a kid, but that also has a vulnerability. And so as you can imagine, a lot of the guests talk about the vulnerabilities now of social media and the screens that young people are on, this feeling that particularly in the pandemic when we've had to be locked in, this getting in front of screens, being disconnected from peers in a face-to-face way. So one of the concerns is just how young people are spending their time. And particularly in a pandemic, a few of the guests recently that we were interviewing talked about not knowing what this season of social disconnectedness is doing to young people right now, and really concerned about that. And then would go a little bit further to talk about, and again, probably not surprising, everyone almost to a T has talked about their concern about the growing mental health and anxiety that young people are facing, which I would say was pre-pandemic as well. The pressure. One of the guests was just talking about how they can see now people opening acceptance letters for university and talking about like it's visually in front of them right now. They know what's happening, who's getting in and who isn't. And it just perpetuates this desire to get into the right school. So before we never really had that, but now it just accentuates that. So now in grade 9, a student might be already investigating every university that they could go to and where they want to get into. And Sid and I, we probably didn't even think about that till grade 11 when maybe not even. So so that's kind of the base. That's like a real high snapshot of what I'm hearing. And I would echo is what I'm experiencing in my context as well.
Yeah, Chris, these are exactly the things that we're seeing as well. Like it's great. It's fascinating how it all resonates so much. And you were talking even about, the idea that kids are exploring these future pieces online, people to see. My son's going through it with university as well, possible athletic things that he's wrestling with. And it's not even our kids, it's actually our leaders and us. Like, it's funny for me as I follow other youth workers, and when they post only the possible best things that are taking place, it causes some self-reflection that's not based on an accurate picture of reality either. So, Chris, one of the things that we talk a lot about is that as mentors, we're most effective when we're modeling healthy ways of being. And so for us to be aware of what's happening in our lives and to really think through what's a right way for us personally to respond to this experience, and then how do we process that with our kids, can be so helpful. And you guys have consistently put tools in the hands of your mentors to be able to do that with students. I think that's great. These are, the other thing you said, Chris, was that the mental health epidemic was taking place before the pandemic. And I would agree with you. Of course, our research pointed to that, and it's just been exacerbated over the last while. Hey, Chris, when you think about these issues, what are some of the ways of responding that your experts are sharing? How do we respond to some of these things that are taking place?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I heard quite frequently, which is something that I would also support myself, and we talked about this a little bit in kind of the mentoring journey, is as adults that care about young people, the first thing we need to do is become really good listeners and really astute at trying to discern not just the young people that we work with, but the world around them as well. And so to me, that's about curiosity. It's about not just dismissing something and being, oh, this Snapchat thing they're always on, this is just ridiculous. What is Snapchat? Why is my daughter interested in it? Why is that? If she gets 10 more minutes on her phone and she'll pick whichever app, it's always Snapchat. So rather than me being like, what's with this Snapchat and rolling my eyes, it's like, wait, hold on a sec. What is Snapchat? Why is she interested in that? What does it do for her? What are the vulnerabilities of it? And to be present and aware to her circumstances. But beyond that, I mean, honestly, Sid, so many of these conversations I get in, the experts, whether they work in the educational world or whether they, spend their whole lives writing and blogging about youth culture or whatever it is, just the simple tool of coming alongside and being quick to listen and slow to speak is the thing that just resonates with me every time. And I've learned this with my own daughter, and I got to be careful because she doesn't like when I talk much about, and this with our kids, right? But man, when kids go through the tweens and the early teens, and as a parent, everything you learned as a youth worker goes out the door because all the advice you give people doesn't work anymore in your own home. And so we're just sitting trying to figure out, like, how do we navigate puberty and the ups and downs. And I read a book, which I would highly recommend to all youth workers, particularly who work with middle school students or junior high. It's called Planet Middle School by Dr. Kevin Lehman, and it's phenomenal. And one of the things he just said is he's like, just don't ask your kids questions. And I was like, why don't ask questions? Just sit and be present and listen to what they say and let the conversations happen naturally. So I'm like, this is crazy advice. So I picked my daughter up for school, and my first thing is like, how's your day? Well, there's a question. So I'm like, okay, he clearly can't mean that. But what he's kind of meaning is like, we're like, what's wrong? How come you're feeling that way? Like, did something happen at school? Like we're so concerned about young people that we enter into this like inquisition and we don't even know we're doing it. And he said, just be there and just be present. And so I just using this as an example. One of the times I just picked her up and I was like, I'm not really going to say anything. I'm like, yeah, it's a lovely day out today, isn't it? Like, I'm like trying to do my best not to ask questions. So we're just driving home, and then it got quiet for a long period of time. And I'm not kidding you. Almost when we're at home, she said, it was a tough day in math today. And I was like, oh my goodness, it works. Right. But just this idea, if we let young people bring their own stuff up at the right time, they will. And we have to be present, to be open, but to listen. And I think the problem, and I don't want to get on a soapbox here with the the typical evangelical church youth ministry is our job is to get up and tell people what they need to know and what they need to do. And what I'm realizing, it's actually more about listening to where people are at, having empathy for their situation, and when we have permission, being able to come alongside and help them in whatever way we can.
Okay, tell me what does the permission look like then? Because we need it hyper specific for those of us leading small groups.
Yeah.
Because we are hearing the stories and the stuff, and we're like, oh, we need to correct that. We need to jump in there. We need to try to change their vantage point, because we just hear all of the brokenness that comes from being a teenager. How do you know when you have permission to start shaping or nudging?
Yeah, so I would say quite simply is when the questions come back to us. What do you think about that situation? Do you have any advice for me? Right? Because we just want to get in there and we're like, we're going to miss the moment. And it goes back to like one of the greatest passages in the Bible, Deuteronomy 6, about youth ministry, right? It goes in, love the Lord your God with your heart. So, tie these things on your doorposts when you're walking, like it's just all integrated. But you go skip down through the whole story, and near the end, it says, so that when your son asks you, what is the meaning of these laws, or what are the meanings of, like, it's their curiosity by how we live has been provoked, that now they're asking us the questions. And so I'm not saying don't get to youth ministry and don't share things and don't give ideas, but I think it's more about when young people start to say, hey, tell me why you live that way. Tell me what your advice would be. I've just told you now, so now my daughter would go, I had a really rough day at math. So then she asked me, Dad, how would I handle this? Well, then I can come alongside and go, okay. So I think the permission piece is a trust thing that's earned over time. It's earned by being present. It's earned by, demonstrating a full empathy where we can actually, and I can tell you, I hear this phrase more often than not, and in my own home, is, Dad, you don't understand what it's like to be a teen today. And I want to first say, are you kidding me? All I do is read articles and research projects. And I want to give her that. Of course I do. This is my profession. But I've learned to stop and look at her and say, you're absolutely right. I have no idea what it's like. Why don't you tell me what it's like to be a teen today? And I actually have to listen. Not like, no. But because I just want to give advice. I just want to help. I'm a dad. I want to help. I'm a guy. I want to help fix her problem. But I've realized it's less. And she has said to me, Dad, you always try to fix my problems. And all she wants is for me to listen and to be with her and to have empathy for her situation. And over time, she will start to say, Dad, what do you think about this? I went on and rambled a bunch there, but
yeah, bro, maybe I wish we would have had this conversation about a week ago, because I could have maybe used it for the.
Trust me, I'll probably make the mistake tomorrow, but
yeah, you know what, Jared, I think we should quit with the guests that bring conviction into the room. This is hard for me here, so Chris, this is just gold. There's a lot of things.
Like, to me, it's about. There's a theme here about patience.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if I could speak to the volunteer youth workers, it's like, you're there because you have a heart for what you're doing. Just be patient. It's not going to happen all at once. It's not like you may have prepared the best lesson. You may have crafted the best questions, and you get up there and and no one responds. They roll their eyes. They're not listening. Just be patient. Just continue to demonstrate that you care. Let them see why you're in it, and be patient. And that's what I've had to learn as a parent, right? Like, you cannot build Rome in a day. And the issues that young people face today are not one conversation solves. And I think so often, particularly because we in Christian youth work think that it's right thinking, that if we think the right things, everything else will be okay. And we just want to give advice and correct thinking. But this is about living and like what it looks and feels like on the ground and every day. And the learning and the knowledge stuff is important, but how it's practiced and lived out. And that takes time to see. It takes time for us to work it out. So anyway, sorry for adding even more.
So
But
good. That's so good. And hey, listen, youth worker, when Chris is saying patience, we're not just talking like wait another week. We're talking
no,
like be
yeah,
patient, be in this for the year, be in this for years, be in this for the whole summer, like whatever the context is. Just extend the timelines. And you might not feel like last week was a great week. That's fine. That's just one amongst a whole long journey that we're on, and that faithfulness can be such a weapon. Chris, thanks so much for that. Hey, listen, you're doing this podcast, and one of the things we love doing is pointing youth workers to other really good resources that can be helpful for them as they pass faith on to the next generation. So tell us about the podcast that you're doing, bro. Tell us about Shaping Our World.
yeah. So Shaping Our World is a podcast that's meant to be pretty quick. It's like 30 minutes max. And each week we invite, or I invite onto the show. I'm the host, but it's really not a lot of my stuff. It's just people that I've met or in our world that spend their whole lives in this, that basically do what we've done today, is just ask their opinion of what are they seeing with youth culture? What are they seeing in the world? What is the research telling us? And have a quick dialogue that uncovers a little bit about what's going on in the lives of young people, but more gives practical advice, tips, and resources to parents, youth workers, people who care about young people, to take the conversation beyond the podcast. It's really meant to be a catalyst, just a quick hit, a teaser to go, oh, that topic's really interesting. How do I find out more? And so it's just a quick snapshot. We have people who, vice principals from international schools, behavioral therapists in schools, youth experts, writers, a whole bunch of different people. We've released 3 episodes as of today that are going out, and there'll be there's 8 in the first season, and we're already recording the second season. So it's basically just trying to bring in a bunch of people who are experts in the field of youth culture and youth work, and giving us a little bit of a window into what they're thinking and hearing.
Awesome. So that's Shaping Our World. And I assume you can grab that podcast from all the different platforms.
You can get it at all the places you normally get a podcast. Yeah.
We'll put the links in the show notes too, and the links to a couple of things there that you mentioned, that book. And so, yeah, really appreciate the work that you're doing, and honestly encourage anyone who's listening to jump over and take a listen. In fact, if they were to download one of the early episodes, which one is your favorite?
Oh man, it's so hard. The first two are with some really seasoned veteran experts in youth ministry, but the third one is my best friend Damon, who's a principal in the Upper Grand District in it's like Guelph, Ontario. He's a principal there, but he was a principal at an international school in Japan, and we're best friends. So it's that you can kind of piece together that, it's not just a professional conversation. So that was probably the most fun to do, because, man, we could have gone on forever. I kind of make fun of him a little bit, but that's a good one to listen to.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, that's about it. Sid, do you want to take us out or give Chris the final word?
Yeah, dude. Chris, thanks so much for your time. Hey, if you're going to give one last thought or word to our volunteer youth workers who are listening here, give us one last takeaway, please.
Yeah, I would say just putting together a bunch of the things that we've talked about. Do not underestimate the role that you play in young people's lives, even if it's not your main thing. That, someone once said, I don't know if it's like a famous philosopher or it's in a book, that people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And every week you show up, there are kids there that are there for a reason. They might be just there with you for the season, or some of them might be there for your lifetime. And always go in with that perspective, knowing that you'll be used in their lives, even in little small ways along the way. And never lose faith that you are making a difference, because all the research tells us that young people need multiple adults in their lives to help shape them. And that's my path. That's why it's called Shaping Our World podcast, is I believe that as we invest in young people, we are shaping our world, because those young people are the future leaders in every sector in where we're growing up. They're going to be making decisions about you and I in the old age homes, Sid. So we want to invest in them now. But anyways, just to encourage, you guys are making a difference, no matter if you can't see it or not, because It's the little seeds that you plant every week. And some of it just might be about being consistent and faithful, showing up to listen, and demonstrating your heart for the people that you serve.
Before you guys leave today, just want to make sure that you know we are very grateful for today's sponsor, Trinity Western University. They are making this podcast happen. They are just an incredible partner of ours. We love the work that Trinity Western's doing. If you haven't heard of them before, they're a great university, primarily based on the West Coast, but they have campuses as well in the U.S. And so they're just, honestly, if you're looking for a place, I mean, for yourself, by all means, but especially when you think of your grade 11, your grade 12 students who are looking to go into a practical field. They want to go get their education, their liberal arts degree, and yet you want to make sure they're at a place that's also going to look out for their faith. Trinity Western's the perfect spot for them. Their mission is to develop godly Christian leaders. And so they're going to do that through great academics, but also through this firm commitment to our faith. So by all means, Trinity Western University, tw.ca. Their link is in the show notes, but you should definitely check that out. We've got lots of students that between Sid and myself that we know have come through that program, and they're phenomenal leaders. We love them in our churches. We love them in the workplace. We love them volunteering with us. And so check out Trinity Western University. And we'll see you guys back here next week for another episode of the Youth Ministry Team Podcast.